In country clubs and the back rooms of pubs, in homes, homesteads and halls right across the West Australian Wheatbelt, you'll find Julian Krieg and his team from Working with Warriors.
When we're talking about men, we really need to acknowledge that there's a whole lot of elements to men. And one of the elements that really gets blokes into a fair bit of trouble is this warrior attitude.
Working with Warriors is an educational program that's about helping rural men and women better understand the male psyche, to recognise the warning signs of depression and anxiety.
Stress is part of living, and sometimes those stresses are exaggerated by things like a drought, because most of my work is in the Wheatbelt. But stress is real, and warriors don't look after their health really well.
In a clear and uncomplicated way, in everyday language, using yarns and the occasional joke, Working with Warriors is about unravelling the logic that makes rural men think and behave the way they do.
It's presented by somebody who clearly understands and relates to his audience. He's not a medical expert, he's just a bloke who knows a bit about how blokes feel, and that's how it's presented. It's presented in a language that they can understand, with a lot of humour and a lot of anecdotal information so that they immediately relate to it. They see, oh yeah, that's me. He's a mate. He's somebody who can sit there and talk to them like one of their mates.
Working with Warriors explores why rural men take risks, why they sometimes abuse themselves and others physically and emotionally, why they compromise their health and safety, and what they can do about it.
Most blokes have got three mates and people they can talk to in their life. Their partner, usually a mentor or a dad or someone, and a mate. 3 people. We have a lot of associates, but not many people we're prepared to spill our guts to, know who they are.
John Sudals is a wheat and sheep farmer who's been dealing with depression for more than 20 years. John's health declined so slowly he didn't realise what was happening.
I don't think these days I've got too many enemies in life, but if I did have, I wouldn't wish what that went through on them. But it was pretty ordinary, you know, not being able to sleep, pacing the floor in the middle of the night, going to work to do my farm work and procrastinating, not making decisions, doing things over and over again, you know, check the sheep today, check the sheep tomorrow, check the sheep the next day.
Even as a young man, John Sudals was well known as a farmer and a champion footballer with the old VFL club South Melbourne. John felt under pressure to live up to the achievements of his father and grandfather, who'd both been leaders in the community. By the time he'd reached his 40s, that pressure was taking its toll.
Like, I just isolated myself. I wouldn't answer the phone. We were coming up to shearing. It was a good season. I got my team organised and things were going along, and you know, everything was going right, but I still wasn't happy.
In 1988, as John Sudals readied for another day of shearing, things came to a dramatic head. After months of relentless stress and fractured sleep, he was on the brink of a breakdown.
That morning I had got to the wool shed at 5 a.m. Now, what would anybody go to the wool shed at 5 a.m. for? But I woke up at 2 o'clock and couldn't sleep, so I might as well have let my wife sleep. So I got out of bed and paced around, and then I thought, well, bugger this, I'll go down to the wool shed.
For many farmers, it's a familiar cycle of work, exhaustion and anxiety. John Sudals was so tired and stressed he was barely able to function, yet he had no idea he was suffering from depression. His uncle arrived just as John broke down.
And he turned up just to see how the shearing was going, and he walked in the door and I just cried. I just broke down and I just could not, and that was the finish. I just said to him, look, I've got to go, I need help.
John received that help and expert care in a city hospital, but he was nervous coming home, worried what people would think of him.
Unless you've been there, and it's hard to understand how it would be so difficult for a bloke like me to walk into the local newspaper agency and ask for the morning paper. And yet it really took a lot of courage for me to lift myself up to just do that.
But John's fears were misplaced. A mate spotted him and wandered over to welcome him home, a small gesture that left a lasting impression.
I'm sitting there in the passenger seat beside the supermarket actually, and sort of he walked up to me and he just said, "G'day Jumbo," he said, "it's good to see you back in town." And that was, I've never forgotten that, like he probably has, but I haven't.
There's much more to a man than just that winning type attitude, but the focus is very much in our modern culture on that winning, and we've almost come full circle to where that warrior stuff comes to the top, and so that sense of loss becomes a real problem for men.
Claire and Harry Taylor turned to working with warriors to cope with a family tragedy. Only days after their daughter Lee underwent major surgery related to cancer, Lee's husband was killed in a road accident.
He didn't usually speed in his farm. He always wore his seatbelt. He was obviously going quicker than he should have, and he didn't have his seatbelt on. Now that was pure pressure. And he said to his mate, "Oh, I've got to get home to Lee and the boys." And that was the last thing he ever actually said to anyone. That was pressure, and I really believe people hitting trees, driving when they're tired, whatever, they're under too much pressure.
The Taylors were devastated and struggled to cope. They sought help and were encouraged to talk about the awful grief they were going through.
Julian just gave us basically the permission to feel how we felt, react how we were reacting, and made us realise that it was normal to be doing what we were doing.
To be able to talk to somebody, whether they say anything or whether they listen or not, just being able to talk to somebody about what the problem is makes the problem sort of not as big a mountain as what you anticipated it was.
The Taylors are convinced the warrior attitude flourishes in country Australia and is the reason many rural men won't confront their problems.
You can't say, our relationship's fallen apart, my wife doesn't love me. That is probably 90% of the problem. And it's sad because it happens to so many people.